Well, great. Thanks for anyone who's watching or listening or watches the recording of this video. This is just a public informational meeting about the stormwater bylaw revisions. And my name is Dan Van Scalquick. I'm the town engineer. And so why don't we get right into it? I have a presentation to provide. Let's see, share screen. Okay. All right. Here's my presentation. So stormwater bylaw revisions. Today's March 15th. This is the public informational meeting. I'm Dan Van Scalquick, the town engineer in Ayer. So just a little background. We have two stormwater bylaws that are current in town. The first one is Article 47. It's titled the NIPD's Phase 2 Stormwater Bylaw, and it focuses on regulating construction and post-construction stormwater management. The second stormwater bylaw is Article 48, and that one focuses on illicit discharges to the municipal storm drain system. So basically anything other than stormwater going down the storm drain is an illicit discharge. There are some non-stormwater discharges that are allowable. Though that's actually outlined in that bylaw. And both bylaws, the ones we have now, were adopted in 2008, and they were amended in 2010 with some minor revisions, and they were put in place to meet the requirements of the 2003 MS4 permit. So I'll describe more what an MS4 permit is for anyone that doesn't know. Basically, the town and any town that has an MS4 system is regulated by EPA and Mass DEP, and it stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, MS4. It's an EPA program. It's been in place since 1990 to regulate discharges from MS4 communities to protect water quality. Originally, it started out, this isn't on the slide, but there were large MS4s, and EPA focused on them first in the 1990 timeframe, and then smaller MS4s got permit requirements starting in 2003. So the town of Ayer, we have a NIPD's stormwater discharge permit through the MS4 permit, and we have specific responsibilities that are required to meet that permit. As I said, the original permit was issued to Ayer in 2003, and you'll see in bold down here, a new MS4 permit was issued and effective on July 1st, 2018. The MS4 permit structure, it consists of 6 minimum control measures. You can see them on the screen here, but I'm going to focus on 3, 4, and 5 because those are related to our bylaws. And 3 is illicit discharge detection and elimination. 4 is construction site stormwater runoff control. So an ongoing construction site, regulations for that stormwater runoff control. And then 5 is stormwater management and new development and redevelopment. So this slide here describes further in detail how each minimum control measure matches our bylaw. So minimum control measure 3 focuses on the illicit discharges to our storm drain system. And so we need to have an adequate legal authority in place to prohibit these illicit discharges, hence why we have the bylaw. And there are several requirements in the MS4 permit for that. Minimum control measure 4, construction site stormwater runoff control. So we have to have an ordinance or regulatory mechanism, AKA that's our bylaw. So that requires the use of sediment and erosion control practices at construction sites. I won't go into any further detail. And then minimum control measure 5 is also taken care of under our NIPD's Phase 2 Stormwater Bylaw, Article 47. That deals with the stormwater management and new and redevelopment. And basically, there are certain triggers in the permit. It's a 1 acre disturbance threshold that would trigger stormwater management, low impact development requirements, meeting Massachusetts stormwater standards, and there's a plethora of other technical requirements required for sites that fall under this minimum control measure. So the 2016 MS4 permit, that's the new one that became effective July 1st of 2018. There was some lawsuits that held it back a bit. So there are many additional requirements in there. I've listed a bunch here. A lot of them are technical, as-built drawings. One of the big ones is design requirements, especially with climate change going on and storms getting stronger. There are requirements to retain more water quality volume and treat more TSS and phosphorus. But I won't get into detail into all of these. So kind of a little more background, a timeline here on our bylaw and our regulations, which are associated with the bylaws. So 2003, the first MS4 permit was issued. 2008, we at Ayer adopted the stormwater bylaws I've described. We had minor amendments to those bylaws in 2010. 2018, EPA issues the new MS4 permit. I call it the second MS4 permit here. In 2020, we finally issued regulations to accompany the bylaws from 2008. They actually were originally drafted around the 2010 timeframe, but they just got put on the back burner, and they were in a review phase, and they just got lost. So in 2020, I brought those to the planning board and revised them to meet most of the requirements of the new permit, but to also have the regulations in place, which is very important to implement the bylaw. And then in the future, by June 30th of this year, we need to have our bylaw updated and our regulations updated to meet the 2018, or I guess it's the 2016 MS4 permit. So what we've done as a town, we set up a work group, which is bullet number 2 here. We established a work group to collaborate on the revisions. I'll get further into that. Number 1, we took advantage of assistance from Central Massachusetts Regional Stormwater Coalition, which the town's a part of. 3, I provided an update to the select board at their December 21st, 2020 meeting to make them aware of that this was coming up. And number 4, the work group has drafted bylaw revisions. Excuse me. So number 1, the town of Ayer is a member of the Central Massachusetts Regional Stormwater Coalition, and we just joined them last year in February. So we've been there for a little over a year now, and they provide a lot of assistance to towns. We collaborate on meeting the permit and our discharges for stormwater. So through the Central Mass Regional Stormwater Coalition, we hired Arcadis Engineering, the coalition did, and they reviewed all the town's bylaws and regulations to determine what level of compliance we had with the new MS4 permit. They prepared a recommendations memo based on that, and based on the new permit requirements, and they prepared bylaw and regulation templates. So these were great tools at our disposal to move forward and come up with our revisions to our bylaw. So you can see all the towns here. There's about 25 or 30 towns in the Central Mass Regional Stormwater Coalition. The work group. So we established a work group to collaborate on these revisions to get all different perspectives. They included myself from DPW, Conservation Commission, planning board member, residents, and a consultant. As I mentioned, I provided an update to the select board in December. So on step 4, the work group drafted bylaw revisions. So we used the consultant recommendations that we received through the Central Mass Regional Stormwater Coalition from Arcadis, and we applied those as we saw best fit in Ayer. And we also looked at some key items in the bylaw to review, just basically the structure of the bylaw and the regulations, and I'll get into that next slide. Whether we should have separate or consolidated bylaws, who the authority should be. It's currently the planning board, and we decided that still fits Ayer the best, so we've stuck with that. Land disturbance thresholds was our biggest change. I'll get into that later. Enforcement, roles, responsibilities, and streamlining with overlapping permits. Excuse me. So the structure of the bylaw and regulations, through Arcadis's recommendation, and we agreed, was the best way to implement the bylaw was to make the bylaw basically the legal authority, the language in the bylaw speak to authority for the town to implement it. And then the regulations will speak more to the technical requirements, design requirements, the stormwater management plan, what's needed in there, and then basically procedures. So, you know, when you submit a permit, here's the application form, here's how many days it takes until XYZ. And then there'll also be guidance materials as well. We'll have examples, details. We'll refer to BMPs. This will all be in the regulations. So the bylaw is kind of actually a smaller update. I think the regulations will be a lot bigger of an update with the technical requirements, and that's to come through the planning board. So changes to Article 47. So we added Zone 2 critical areas under our stormwater bylaw. So if there's, I don't know if I have it here. Yeah, so Zone 2 critical areas and impaired water bodies. So we added a 2,000 square foot land disturbance within a Zone 2 area or where a discharge is directly or indirectly to an impaired water body. That will require a stormwater permit. We thought that was a good thing to do because of the sensitive receptors, the Zone 2 and the impaired water bodies. And a lot of other towns in the Central Mass region are moving that way. We changed the minimum land disturbance from 40,000 square feet down to 20,000 square feet. I'll get into that later. We added a 30% net increase in impervious area on lots that already have a decent amount of impervious area to trigger a stormwater permit. And we basically added site plan review and subdivision control as requiring a stormwater permit, just to remove any gray areas there, because in almost all cases, those submittals do require stormwater permits. We did a procedural thing, moved minor and major projects to the regulations, and we added the right to enter property to assess and repair. So this is still in a draft form as well, and it's under town council review now, but I'll get further into that. Article 48, there wasn't too much to update there. We added a couple items to the allowable non-stormwater discharges, and we allow the DPW superintendent and or the planning board to adopt the regulations. And the idea with that was the original bylaw only had the DPW superintendent allowed to adopt the regulations, but we currently have one set of stormwater regulations and we kind of want to keep it as one. So allowing the planning board to just make that adoption as well, we can, streamline, keep everything into one stormwater reg rather than having two separate regulations for each bylaw. So land disturbance thresholds, I talked about that briefly. The minimum threshold, we changed it from 40,000 to 20,000. Some of the reasons are we weren't capturing projects that we should capture. I'll show you on the next slide an example. As I mentioned, most of the towns are moving to this threshold as well in our region. And in general, based on the development trends we're seeing, it's kind of, smaller things are going on. But there are some that we want to capture, especially multi-lot construction. So let me skip this slide for a second. So there was a redevelopment recently. This is Sandy Pond Road and Central Ave, and there's a 3-lot. It was 3 lots that were redeveloped, and you can see each one was about 12,000 square feet or so, combining a combination of 37,000 square feet. So even if the actual disturbance was the entire lots, it would have been less than the 40,000 that we currently have in our bylaw. So they wouldn't have triggered a stormwater permit. And we actually had an issue here. They had a lot of sandy soils up on this side of the lots, and it pitches toward Central Ave, and it was actually running down the gutter line and heading into one of our catch basins out to Flanagan Pond. So I had to ask the developer to get some erosion controls in there, and I had to work with the building inspector on that one to make sure it happened. So, that's really a project that we thought is something that should be captured by our land disturbance thresholds. Another reason for lowering the land disturbance general threshold to 20,000 is you look at the number of permits that are being submitted every year. It's about 3 or 4, some years 1, 2, 2. So it's not very many. And if you look at parcel size, just distribution in town, most of the parcels are less than that 40,000 square feet. So like we just saw as an example, there were 3 parcels that were less than the quarter acre, and you could kind of get all those and not be required for a stormwater permit. So it makes sense to the work group's standpoint to lower that threshold. So adding 30% net increase in impervious area on a lot with at least 5,000 square feet of existing impervious area. We did this because these are lots that already have moderate to high impervious areas. And if they expand another 30%, we thought it would have more significant impacts to stormwater quality. We don't want to chase small square footages everywhere. So we kind of set that minimum at 5,000 of existing. So it's kind of hard to see on this map, but anything in green on this map is greater than has a impervious area greater than 5,000 square feet. Just kind of taking a step back. This map is from several years ago, 2013, when we were working on a stormwater utility in Ayer, and we the impervious areas were mapped out on each lot in Ayer. So you see most of the green are non-residential, and that's kind of, we didn't want to, have these permits triggering single residential homes either. At this time, we just felt it was best to go after more significant areas to capture those, I guess, to have stormwater permits, to have a positive impact on the stormwater quality. So the 2,000 square foot land disturbance in our critical areas, we call them, zone 2 area, or a impaired water body where there's discharge to an impaired water body. So we wanted to focus our stormwater management on these areas. And also we have data, like Massachusetts has a 303D water bodies list. So from that one, there's several impaired water bodies in Ayer, one being the Nashua River, which has a phosphorus limit. And then also in 2016, Geosyntec did a biological survey and assessment of the ponds. And we, based on that pond assessment, I think I have the slide here. So here's a link to it. It's on the conservation website. But there are recommendations for phosphorus goals. So as people have probably noticed, we do treatments to the ponds every year, and that's because they're becoming eutrophic, which means they're becoming inundated with vegetation, essentially. So Sandy Pond and Flanagan Pond are a little bit above the recommended average total phosphorus goals of 25 micrograms per liter. So, by reducing phosphorus loading to these ponds in our stormwater, we can help make the ponds less eutrophic. Grove Pond is very high, and it's kind of beyond saving. It's turning swampish. But these are goals that we wanted to have a stormwater threshold to sort of be like, see what projects going on and see if it's going to have an impact in these areas. And the threshold of 2,000 square feet too is we thought was high enough not to be kind of at a nuisance level, I would say. So add activities subject to site plan review and subdivision control law. So that was basically kind of just to avoid any gray areas. If we felt any project that goes to those should probably be covered under a stormwater permit if they aren't already. This is just kind of a slide of, in general, I've been mentioning this along the way. We don't, typical homeowner scale projects aren't something we want to be getting in these thresholds. If there's a whole reconstruction of a house and it triggers one of those thresholds we've done, then okay. But I did a patio replacement project at my house, and these are photos from it, and it was about a 750 square foot disturbance, so that wouldn't have been triggered by the permit. And I would hope the same if I was a homeowner in Ayer. I wouldn't want to be triggering stormwater permits and having to pay an engineer and submit for that. Although in the regulations there will be minor and major projects distinction, so smaller projects won't have as rigorous of a permitting process anyways. But what's next on the horizon? So the draft bylaw documents, they are currently posted on the town webpage for you to view. They're going to be up there from March 15th through the 26th. and you can provide comments. You can just email me any comments you have, any questions you have, reach out to me. I put the link here for the, it's under the stormwater page under DPW, where the draft bylaws are located. The work group will reconvene after the comment period, just to see if there are any comments and that we would consider incorporating into the final bylaw. And then the bylaw will, the amendments to the bylaw will be brought to town meeting on April 26th for a vote. And then after that, we'll focus on the regulations and work with the planning board to update and adopt those. So that's my presentation. Took a little longer than I thought. I hope I didn't talk too fast, but if anyone has any questions who's on the line, you know, now's a good time, or you can always email me or call down at the DPW. I can stop share. All right. Well, I don't hear anything. All right. Well, I appreciate all those who watched or attended on Zoom, and, you know, just reach out to me if there's any questions, and thanks again.